Um, I'm Jerry Garfinkel. Excuse the hat. I need for sun. Uh, this is the Jewish Study Center, and we're having a great class today in celebration, basically, of the 250th birthday of our country. But I am the treasurer of the Jewish Study Center. As such, I want to tell you that our classes are free. Everybody is welcome, but we have expenses, and so we encourage donations. Don't require them. We don't say how much to give, but if you make a donation, we appreciate it. If you can go to our website, www.jewishstudycenter.org, and click on donate, and then you can donate with your credit card or with your PayPal account or send a check. If you click on send a check, the website will tell you where to send the check. Okay, I think that's my treasury duty. I'm also tech director, so I want to tell you a few technical points. One thing is that this is being recorded, and after the class is over, I will take the recording and upload it to YouTube, and then I'll send an email to everybody who's registered with the link to where the recording is. And my email may have some more information on it also. So today's Wednesday, Thursday or Friday, we'll get an email with the link to the recording. We also have the closed captions on. So if you can't understand my residually New York accent, or Howard or Dr. Zola, you can look at the closed captions. I know it's fairly accurate. Okay. One more thing. I have muted everybody, but that we still want your comments and your questions. So write your comments or your questions in the chat file. Address them to everybody. Sometimes you ask a question, the next guy is going to answer it for you. You don't need us for that. Anyway, correspondence will occur. So put it in to everybody. Okay, now I will introduce Howard Mortman, who, besides being a board member of the Jewish Study Center and also the communication director of C-SPAN, is actually a very funny guy, but don't look at his face. But he's still a funny guy. So, Howard, I'm trying to spotlight you. Wait a minute, that's not Howard.
Hi, Dina.
Howard, how'd you get there? How'd you get there?
Keep Dina up. It's fine. That's right.
What happened there?
All right. It's all right.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, that looks like Howard.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Jerry. This is great. Jerry's correct. We wanted to do this program as the Jewish Study Center's contribution to the America 250 celebration, but judging by the turnout, it's become more like the Dr. Gary Zola fan club meeting here. So what a huge gathering. I want to get right to Dr. Gary Zola. I'm going to do two things, just give you a quick introduction from his bio, but then a couple personal words about how thrilled I am, at least, and I think my colleagues on the board are, to have him. Dr. Gary Philip Zola is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Jacob Rader Mark.
You're muted, Howard. I muted everybody, including you.
I was just saying how great Dr. Zola is. And I'll just continue on. Dr. Zola is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives, and the Edward Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor Emeritus of the American Jewish Experience and Reformed Jewish History at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. He received his rabbinic ordination in 1982 and his PhD in American Jewish History in 1991. And Dr. Zola became the American Jewish Archives' second director in 1998, succeeding his teacher and mentor, Professor Jacob Rader Marcus, the prodigious scholar who first defined the field of American Jewish history. And actually, it's an extensive bio. It's so impressive. But I want to stop there because Dr. Zola has taught me that everybody has kind of somebody who inspires them to love history and to teach. And in his bio, there's a mention of Dr. Marcus, and I know Dr. Marcus has played an immense role in the shaping of Dr. Zola and his love of history and American Jewish history. So too has Dr. Zola shaped my love and appreciation of uh, of history. The American Jewish Archives is an incredible institution, both in the physical plant and their online resources. I have used them enormously in my personal research into politics and the American Jewish experience. It is not just a Jewish it's not just a contribution to Jewish history in America, it's a contribution to all of American history. And I have found documents and primary sources in the American Jewish Archives that has eluded presidential libraries and is easier to find. So this is a huge moment. I'm going to just now turn it over right now to Dr. Gary Zola, and who has much more to contribute than I do. So, Dr. Zola, on behalf of my colleagues and this huge standing room only Zoom crowd here, thank you for teaching us tonight.
Well, Howard, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And uh, as you heard from Howard, I am I am a rabbi, and therefore I'm a teacher. And um uh, it, there's nothing more uplifting than to see people who want to be students and want to learn. So it's wonderful to see so many people want to study American Jewish history. So I'm just gonna, like any good clergy person, before I speak, I have something to say. And uh, I do want to acknowledge Howard's very warm introduction. We've been friends now a long time. And if you folks haven't seen Howard's wonderful book uh, on uh, the rabbis who gave prayers at Congress, Howard has written the authoritative volume documenting all the rabbis in American history who've had the privilege of uh, offering a prayer before the houses of Congress. And so that's how we met, and maybe a little before that. And I'm now encouraging him to work on a second book. And for those of you, I already said hello to my friends from Charleston. I see there are people from all over the country. I want to say I wish I could acknowledge all of you who are my friends and who I've taught before. Uh, um, but no, my heart is there, and that would be my wishes. So let me start. And first thing I need to do, and I hope it's all going to work, is I'm going to share my screen because I prepared a um, a PowerPoint show for you folks. So now you'll have to tell me if uh,
I see
we.
it well.
Okay, great. And just so you know, all you folks who are listening and have your screens on, uh, I'm using two screens, so I'm looking at all of you, and my PowerPoint is on a different screen, so no sticking out your tongues or any of that, or sleeping, because I'll see that. Okay, so let's begin and uh, start our lesson. One of the most important points is that uh, Jewish communal life in North America begins in the year 1654. It's at this time that 23 Jewish men, women, and children land on the island of New Amsterdam. Today we call it New York. And this is important because, as you can see from the very earliest times, that is colonial period, there has been consistently a Jewish community. And uh, this is highly unusual because there is no other example in all of diaspora history of Jewish community being present when you have the birth of a republic. In other words, in all of the other diaspora experiences, we may have come along and settled, but we didn't help to create the sense of nation or the kingdom or the monarchy. We, as a people, were outsiders and hopefully guests, sometimes welcome, sometimes not. Now, Jewish life in America had many advantages for the Jews, but that doesn't mean there weren't disadvantages. Uh, so, for example, Jews were always permitted in every place they settled in America, in North America, to live where they wanted. There has never been a ghetto in America. Um, uh, Largely, Jews were unmolested with regard to uh, sales and business. They were able to establish businesses, and that was important. Have a place to live and be able to make a living is appealing, and that wasn't always the case in Europe. Uh, However, there were disadvantages too. It wasn't all a bowl of cherries. So, for example, uh, you rarely saw a Jew. It was almost impossible to hold office during the colonial period because, for a variety of reasons, sometimes constitutions or documents prohibited it, but other times, in order to assume office, you had to uh, agree to say a pledge, an oath, and that oath was made on Christian terms, and so that was something Jews wouldn't want to do. And of course, people came over and immigrated to this part of the world. They carried lots of things in their baggage. They carried clothing and their belongings. They also carried religious bigotry, and that was here as well. So it was largely a positive experience for Jews. They settled in places where they had the best opportunities to live and to acculturate and to conduct business, but there were also shortcomings. Now, by the time of the birth of the nation, when the war breaks out, that is the War of Independence, Jews were living in 5 cities, and you see them here: Savannah, Charleston, Philadelphia, New York, and Newport. And the reason that they settled in these places is because, as I was saying a minute ago, these were places where they had the best opportunities to succeed in business and in living circumstances. And if I had more time, I could elucidate on that point because each of these 5 cities uh, had different reasons why the Jews liked being there. Of course, they were all port cities, and that's important. That was important because as a port city, you could bring in business and materials from the ocean, from across the ocean, and that was very important to those Jews who were involved in mercantile work, and that was that was a big part of what Jews did. That was a skill that they brought over to this part of the world from the old world. Now, when the Declaration of Independence is issued on July the 4th, 1776, we have these 5 operating congregations functioning. These are bona fide congregations, some of them having over 100 families in them. So they were not inconsequential. And of course, Jews lived in other places, but didn't have an organized community. I'll just mention, for the record, that by the time the Constitutional Convention is in place, which will come up the following decade, there's a 6th congregation. That 6th congregation is in Richmond. So as you can see, by the time of the Constitution is adopted, we have 3 Jewish communities in the north and 3 Jewish communities in the south. And if you are wondering, if it ever crossed your mind, why is it that the 3 congregations, all of these still exist and function to this day, all 6 of them. And if you're all wondering, why is it that the 3 in the north all retain allegiance to their original liturgy, that is the Spanish, Portuguese, Sephardic, Orthodox liturgy, and the 3 in the south are all bastions of Reform Judaism, you will want to get your hands on a brilliant article written by a guy named Zola called The Ascendancy of Reform Judaism in the American South. And I try to explain how that happened. Now, I'm going to ask all of us to go back to our civics classes and to remind you that the war draws to an end sort of as a tie, if you will, the 1782, and there is a current government. To remind all of you, we learned all of this in high school. This was run by a document called the Articles of Confederation. And we had a Congress, we had a leader, a president, but to move as quickly as possible, this was a document that really leaned into the opponents of federalism. This was what you would call a structure of government that was giving lots of strength to the individual colonies or the states, and not such a big emphasis on the federal government. And this quickly posed all sorts of problems. We don't have time tonight to analyze this fully, but you know some of them. There was problems with the mail. There was problems with organizing a defense, which, as you know, in 1812, we were going to need that again. How to organize all of the colonies into some kind of a united army. What about business across boundaries and taxation and all sorts of issues that worried those who fought for independence. So those arguing for a greater form of federal government, meaning more strength in unity as opposed to the states, begin to agitate very quickly and are critical of what is in place. And the problem is, and it's a problem that there are residual evidence of this to our own day, is the balance between federalism and states' rights. This is a very delicate matter. You want to make sure that we have a strong unity government, but we don't want to recreate a monarchy. We don't want to recreate an autocracy, and the federal government gaining too much power was worrisome, especially to some of the states that had built into their colony an ideology which was very much fearful of and opposed to um, any kind of strong central government. So the coming together and recreating a government, a new government, was in large part a debate over how to balance these two issues. If they lean too much towards federalism in the new government, they may lose some of the states. And if they lean too much towards anti-federalism, then we would be back to where we were with the uh, document you see in front of you, which was the Articles of Confederation. So finally, in 1784, finally, we have the beginnings of serious talk about the coming together and a constitutional convention. Eventually, in 1785 and 86, this will take place, and a document is created, a new republic, and there's a lot of debating going on during this period of time. And the states, some are much more interested in the federal government than others. Those people who were the biggest advocates of enlightenment during this debate were, of course, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And they're important in this story that I'm going to tell you in a minute, that I'm telling you now about and setting the context for our document, is that these people had a very radical view of religion. These were delegates who felt that the government that was going to be created did not need to have any religious affiliation. And this was a very radical idea. It was, even to some extent, in my opinion, as a student of this period, it's even more radical than the outrageous idea that people could govern themselves. I mean, even these folks that you're looking at were a little concerned about just ordinary bobos voting and ruling themselves, which is why the Constitution requires, in its original form, a certain level of education, because you had to be, obviously, you couldn't be a woman, you couldn't be a slave, and you certainly couldn't be just someone without money and vote. You had to have some person of consequence, because the fear that just anyone could vote, people who were completely ignorant, it was worrisome even to these liberals. Now, the idea that a government could exist without a unifying religion was quite unusual, and it is unusual to this day, because if you look around the world, the majority of the countries in the world today do still have official religions in some form or fashion. The United States is still, to this day, we'll have to see what happens, but is still to this day quite unusual in this idea that the government should take no official stance on any one religion. Now, we all know this man, the famous Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Well, here's an example of some of the delegates. Henry was one who was opposed to the idea of a country without a religion. And there were other delegates as well. Now, I don't want to say that Patrick Henry was trying to impose bigoted government. He could understand that people were entitled to freedom of conscience, but he felt that without a unifying government, religion in the government, that the people could never rally around some kind of united front spiritually. And there were others. And of course, this debate too continues to this very day. But uh, uh, this this man, a man named Jonas Phillips, he lived in Philadelphia. He was a very important, prominent Jew. He was at one time the president of Mikveh Israel congregation in Philadelphia. And he was so worried as the Constitutional Convention was playing itself out that the people like Patrick Henry might win the day, that he writes a letter to George Washington during the convention, which has survived. It's a very important letter, and you can find it posted online. Just look up Jonas Phillips to George Washington. And this letter has a powerful request that he puts before the the president, the chair of the Constitutional Convention. Jonas Phillips says, "I'm pleading with you, please, for my sake, for the sake of my children, and for the sake of the Israelites in all of the 13 colonies, give the Jews equal footing under the law." Now, the Constitutional Convention had already debated this matter, and they had already gone in the direction of the delegates like Jefferson and Madison. But Jonas Phillips did not know that. He was not part of the convention, and we therefore have very good evidence that this was very much on the minds of our co-religionists who lived during that period. They were concerned that the new country, the new republic, might not give the Jews equal footing under the law. So the Constitution is now adopted. It's adopted by these delegates, and now it has to go to the states, each state, for ratification. And if they had passed a variety of laws that if they couldn't get the states to ratify this document, then this document would not have gone into existence. And furthermore, they made an arbitrary decision that they had to have at least 9 of the 13 colonies agree to ratify this document, or it would not be put in place. So there is a whole process that starts of taking the document back from the convention to the states, and hopefully the states will embrace it and ratify it. Now, if you've ever been to Delaware, I see there are people from all over the country. I don't know if we have anybody online from Delaware, but if you go to Delaware, you'll see that they put on their license plates that Delaware is the first state to embrace ratify the Constitution. But that could have been the only state. But fortunately, right away, we have state after state begins to ratify. So Delaware, it goes out. The Constitutional Convention towards the end of '86 sends it to the states. Delaware uh, uh, is the first to ratify it. Actually, it goes out in 1787, and then you see that by June of 1788, the following year, by June of 1788, you have 9 states that have ratified the Constitution, and that's a big achievement because that means that you're going to have a country that is ruled or governed by the new Constitution. But there were other states who were kind of pokey in terms of joining. New York comes in, and then it is not until 1789 that North Carolina joins. But if you're looking carefully, you notice that there's one state missing, and that state is the very last state. That state is Rhode Island. And Rhode Island is the most obstreperous state because Rhode Island is, interestingly, for a variety of reasons, is the most anti-federalist of all the states. They have this whole history, as you know, of dissenters, and they were worried about. They were a small state, they were a small colony. They were not certain. In fact, if memory serves me correctly, they initially didn't even want to ratify the Constitution. They didn't even agree to vote on it. However, um, uh, the other concerns that some of the states had were immediately addressed by the creation of the Bill of Rights. Let me see if I can pull that up. I see this slide is a little out of order here. Let me go to the Bill of Rights. Whoops. There you go. The Bill of Rights is initiated in June of 1789, as soon as Congress comes into existence. And the Bill of Rights is an attempt to address some of the personal rights that some of the states, including Rhode Island, were concerned about: freedom of a religion, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, and others. And so you'll see that this process is initiated. This is James Madison. He's given credit for putting the first draft of the Bill of Rights together. It is discussed by the first Congress in 1789, and it is adopted by the first conference and sent to the states. Apparently, there were 12 amendments, and the states, all of them ratified the 10 that we call the Bill of Rights. Now let me go back a little bit and pick up where I left off. Okay, so you see that North Carolina and Rhode Island, especially Rhode Island, join after the Congress approves the Bill of Rights and sends it out to the states. Now, the Articles of Confederation, about which we spoke a few minutes ago, says essentially on March the 4th, 1789, that there are enough states that have joined the Union that the Republic is going to begin on March the 4th, 1789. So the old government is done and the new government begins. The end of 88 and early 89 elections are taking place. And so Congress comes into existence on March the 4th, 1789, and begins its work. The man they choose is chosen by acclamation. The only such person to have that honor is George Washington. He's selected as president, and he's selected unanimously, and he is officially inaugurated on the 30th of April, 1789. And all over, there is great celebration for the creation of this new nation, and especially tributes to this demigod, George Washington, who helped to win the freedom, who chaired the Constitutional Convention, and my God, he really has done everything. And so people begin to write letters of congratulations after April the 30th, congratulating Washington on his ascension to the office. So Washington gets one letter from the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Churches. He receives a letter from the Roman Catholics of the United States. He receives a letter from the United Baptist Church of Virginia. He receives a letter from the annual meeting of the Quakers. He receives a letter from the directors of the Society of the United Brethren for propagating the gospel among the heathens. He receives a letter from the chiefs and the counselors of the Seneca Nation. He receives a letter from even the Virgin's Fair and the Matron's Grave of Trenton, New Jersey, and they gather to sing a song to him on his inaugural trip. There are several other letters, many letters, and the United States National Archives has published a booklet of these letters. Now I'm going to ask all of you to think in your own little minds how many letters the Jews, now there were probably somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 Jews in the 13 new states at this time, the time that Washington is inaugurated, and to ponder in your minds how many letters the Jews of America at that time, we may have been 0.01% of the entire population, how many letters the Jews write to President Washington to congratulate him on becoming president. And of course, I see some people mouthing 1,500. And of course, that makes good sense because nobody speaks for us but us. And so, actually, there were four letters. And how that happened is interesting. For whatever reason, in 1790, early in 1790, the Savannah congregation writes its own letter. And this is a disappointment to this man, Manuel Josephson. Josephson is at that time, he's the president of the congregation in Philadelphia, and he is trying to organize all the congregations, all six of them, to write a letter unified, just like all the other religions, on behalf of the Jews of the new nation. But as I said, Savannah short sheets him, and they write their own letter. And that letter is delivered, as I say, in April of 1790. Josephson, however, does deserve credit. He manages to corral four congregations. So now we have one last letter that hasn't been written. And of course, the reason for that is it's Rhode Island. It's the Jews of Newport. They will not join in until they join the Union. And so the Bill of Rights is ratified at that time, and they finally join the Union. And in order to say thank you and to salute, the state of Rhode Island, the new state, the last to join, President Washington personally takes a trip up to Newport. He brings his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and they take a trip. It's an entourage, and they go up to Newport, Rhode Island. Newport, Rhode Island has a beautiful synagogue that still stands and is still a house of prayer today. Although I see there are my friends from Charleston will want me to remind you that for a period of time, Truro Synagogue did not have worship services. It was not functioning for a period of time as a synagogue. So the oldest synagogue in continuous usage as a house of prayer is Kahal Kadosh Beth Elohim in Charleston, South Carolina, which opened up in 1840. But this still stands. It's quite something to see. It's in a very prominent place. As you pull up to the port, you could see it from the port. It's on a bluff, and it overlooks. It was a very distinguished and very prominent facility. And Washington, without question, would notice it. Now, the Jews of this congregation get together and they start to meet because they're going to give Washington a letter. And it's this letter that we're about to study. And this letter is, of all the letters, of the three different letters from the congregations, the Savannah letter, the letter from the other four congregations, and then this letter, this is the most important letter because it, for several reasons. First, because of its content. And second, and it's related, is because this is the only letter where we actually have the document of the letter that the Jews themselves composed to write to Washington. The other letters, the other two, we have newspaper recreations of those letters that the Jews wrote to Washington of congratulations. But this is the original, and we therefore know for sure that everything that is in it, we have the document, everything in it is exactly what the Jews presented to him personally, not through an intermediary, which was, by the way, sometimes what happened with the other letters. What the Jews did not, they sent it. They didn't necessarily see Washington, but Washington receives this letter when he is in Newport in September. Excuse me, in August of 1790. Now let's take a look at the letter. This is the letter, and some of you have printed off copies of it. I wish I could tell you, after all the beautiful things that Howard said about the American Jewish Archives, I wish I could tell you it's in the American Jewish Archives. It is not. It's in the Library of Congress. You can see the stamp of the Library of Congress right up here, where the stamp is. And if you look at it, you can actually read it. It's very beautifully written. And you see, by the way, that it's signed by a man named Moses Satius. Satius is listed there as the warden. I told Dr. Um, uh, uh, I guess I told Howard and um, some of the others who are organizing the this that that Moses Seixas was probably called in his day the Parnas. This is the title that is still used in some of the southern congregations. Parnas is the Hebrew word for the person in charge of the money, the leader who makes sure that that everything is running and that there's funding for everything. But you certainly wouldn't want to tell your non-Jewish neighbors that you were the Parnas. They wouldn't know what you meant by that, and so they had to come up with a name, and so they relied on the way the British handled it, the British Jews, and they used the word warden, which was a person who ran an institution. But I always say to presidents of congregations today, whenever I speak, I'm sure every president agrees with me that it's probably would be appropriate to bring back the title of warden again if you're the president of a congregation. At any rate, what I've done is I've transcribed this letter in big letters for you. And normally, if we were all in the same room, I would invite some of you to read the letter. But because of time and because we're meeting virtually, you'll follow along with me and I'll read it. And I'm going to stop and comment as we go through. The way I teach this in my classes in person is we read it like we read the text, like we might read the Torah. We read it line by line and we analyze it. So let me begin. You see, the Jews of Newport say these words to the president when they hand him this letter. Permit the children of the stock of Abraham to approach you with the most cordial affection and esteem for your person and merits, and to join with our fellow citizens in welcoming you to Newport. Now, you could easily read this and breeze right by it and not notice two very important facts that should not be overlooked. First, these Jews deliberately uh, um, refer to themselves as children of the stock of Abraham. And if there weren't so many people online, I would ask you, why did they do that? And the answer is, of course, they are very cognizant when they write this letter of presenting themselves to President Washington in a way that reminds the president that they are related, that he may be a Christian, but that Jews and Christians are all children of Abraham. Now, there was no organized Muslim community at that time, though there may have been a few Muslims, slaves, and others who existed in America at that time, but there was no organized community. So I doubt they were thinking of the Muslims, but they were definitely, they had in mind, wanted to convey the idea that don't forget who we are. We're not Jews. We're not Israelites. We're not Hebrews. We are children of the stock of Abraham. We are your brothers. That's how they begin. The second interesting point is, of course, that they wish to join with their fellow citizens in welcoming the president to Newport. Now, that's easy to breeze by, too. What's so big and important about such a statement? Well, stop and think. If they wished, they could have joined with all the other citizens to welcome Washington. They could have been Newport citizens. They didn't have to do this as Jews. But this has been, if you will, this is the formula that exists to this day. Every one of you, anybody who's on this screen, who is an identifying Jew, not people who have left Judaism, but people who want to join and be a part of the Jewish people in America. On the one hand, we wish to be Americans, fully American, and to participate in everything that's American. But on the other hand, we also wish to preserve our Jewish identity. And this is the balance that they're striking out. They could have joined with other groups if they had wished. In fact, there was another letter written to Washington, and that letter came from the Freemasons, the Jewish Freemasons of Newport. So they write their own letter. In other words, they could have easily joined in with the Freemasons of Newport. They could have been part of that. That was the whole ethos of Freemasonry. But instead, these Jews wrote their own. 4 of them or 5 of them got together and wrote a special letter as to their brother George as Freemasons. Now, the second paragraph, as you see, goes like this. With pleasure, we reflect on those days of difficulty and danger, when the God of Israel, who delivered David from the peril of the sword, shielded your head in the day of battle. And we rejoice to think that the same Spirit who rested in the bosom of the greatly beloved Daniel, enabling him to preside over the provinces of the Babylonish Empire, rests and will ever rest upon you, enabling you to discharge the arduous duties of the chief magistrate of these states. So you see, they frame everything in a biblical dimension. They tell George Washington that the God of Israel, the same God that protected our ancestors, protected you and guarded you over these days. And the God they select, they decide to pick 2 biblical characters. Now you might ask yourself, why not Moses? Why not Joshua? Why not Deborah? Why do they select David and Daniel? And if you're telling yourself, if you're saying, well, that's because David is the original progenitor of the Messiah, you're probably right. In other words, if you open up the New Testament and you look at the Gospel of Matthew or the Gospel of Luke, if you look there, the first thing you're going to see is a genealogy. And you're going to see in Matthew from Abraham all the way a descendancy to David and then all the way to Jesus. And if you look in Luke, you will see from David to Jesus. And so we know from our Hebrew, from our synagogue and our liturgy, that the Messiah is the Mashiach ben David. The Messiah must be a descendant of David. Now let me digress for one important minute. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you tonight. Do any of you know what color hair King David had? Well, you have to go and look in the book
Red
of
hair.
Samuel. Thank you. Thank you. That is exactly correct.
Red.
Red hair. And therefore, if you go to Europe and you go and visit all the great church art and you see the nativity scenes, I want you to pay careful attention from now on how many times the little baby Jesus in the manger has red hair. You will be surprised that 8 or 9 times out of 10, the little baby Jesus has red hair. Now, when he grows up, somehow he loses his red hair, but in the manger, he has red hair. So I just want to say that we redheads deserve a lot more credit than we're getting. And there is no doubt on my mind, since we're Jewish and we're still awaiting the Messiah, that the Messiah, when the Messiah comes, God willing, will be a Mashiach ben David and certainly be a redhead. So a little more respect, if you please. Now, Daniel also fits into this very same
Yeah.
figure. You know, Daniel is a book that is written largely in Aramaic. There's a lot of Aramaic, and some of the book of Daniel's seems to allude to a Messiah. And Christians read the book of Daniel very differently than Jews do, and they see in Daniel the prefigurement and the arrival of Jesus. And so I'm quite certain that those who wrote this letter picked David and Daniel as opposed to any other number of great biblical heroes, because these are names that President Washington would be able to understand and to with which he could identify. Now we continue, and this is the most important paragraph, friends. The Jews write this paragraph. This is the heart of the letter. This is what they're after. This is key. They say, deprived as we have hitherto been of the invaluable rights of free citizens, we now, with a deep sense of gratitude to the Almighty Disposer of all events, behold a government erected by the majesty of the people, a government which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, but generously affording to all liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship, deeming every one of whatever nation, tongue, or language equal parts of the great governmental machine. This so ample and extensive federal union, whose basis is philanthropy, mutual confidence, and public virtue, we cannot but acknowledge to be the work of the great God, who ruleth in the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, doing whatsoever seemeth him good. Now, there is no possible way of knowing what they're talking about in the first line when they say, we have been deprived of our invaluable rights as citizens, as free citizens. Are they speaking about the United States of America, meaning North America, where they lived and where they did suffer sometimes disabilities? I don't know. Possible. Were they speaking about historically over the sweep of diaspora? I don't know. It's we're all free to take whatever position you want to take on that. But they start by saying we have not had full rights. We have been disabled. That's their point.
While and I rolled around for a while. I was like, I can't wait for them to have sex. Amara having sex. Oh.
Okay, somebody's got their microphone on, so you got to turn that off. So then they go on and they make a statement which is truly remarkable. And if that statement sounds familiar to all of you, that is the famous statement that we behold a government erected by the majesty of the people, a government which to bigotry gives no sanction, to persecution no assistance. If that sounds familiar, it should, because you will see in Washington's response that he repeats that back to them. And whenever you see that phrase, it is attributed to George Washington. And why not? He was the first president and a great leader. But now you know the rest of the story. This phrase was put into George Washington's mouth by our ancestors. And they wrote that phrase and they delivered it to Washington, and he liked it, and he regurgitates it back to them, maybe even makes it stronger.
I'm going to mute everybody, so you may be muted, Dr. Zola, but you can unmute yourself. You're muted.
Okay, so now let's keep going. They have now made their point, and now they want to sign off. And I just want to read this quickly because they're ending this letter with great bravado, and of course, bravado that is completely embedded in biblical bloviation. So here they go. For all the blessings of civil and religious liberty which we enjoy under an equal and benign administration, we desire to send up our thanks to the Ancient of Days, the great preserver of men, beseeching him that the angel who conducted our forefathers through the wilderness into the promised land may graciously conduct you through all the dangers and difficulties of this mortal life, and when, like Joshua, full of days and full of honor, you are gathered to your fathers, may you be admitted into the heavenly paradise to partake of the water of life and the tree of immortality. Now, that's pretty good. You got to admit that. That's pretty thick. And you see what they're doing here is they are answering the question that they're posing to the president. In other words, instead of just saying in the letter, Mr. President, we would like to know, are all the rights and immunities and privileges that are in this Constitution, are they aimed at us? Are we included in this? Because if you ask such a question, you may get an answer that you don't want. You may get someone who easily says no. So you, instead of posing it as a question, you make a statement. You say, we've been disabled, but now, thank God, hallelujah, thanks to you and all who are like you, we live in a country that has the blessings of civil and religious liberty, that we enjoy equal and benign administration. It makes it much harder to say, no, that's wrong. Remember, friends, the Constitution of the United States of America makes no mention of the Jew. We're not mentioned. And if you say, so what, nobody else is mentioned, that's not true. The Constitution disables women, as you know. The Constitution disables slaves, black people, as you know. And all these things have to eventually be corrected. So the absence of a mention of the Jew is interesting. What does it mean? And all you have to do is look in the news today, and you can see to this very day that there are still people, I'm afraid, and I say this without any political overtone, I'm just making a statement of fact, that it's clear that the Secretary of Defense does not understand the Constitution the way I do, and the way maybe many of you do. And that's what has been the debate from the very beginning. In other words, because we're not mentioned, does that mean we are entitled to all the same rights and privileges that everybody is entitled to? There are some who say no, that the point of the Constitution was not to allow one Protestant denomination to have rule over the others. The Lutherans should not rule over the Methodists, and so forth and so on. We don't want a church religion, but we don't want. That's what we're thinking of. We're thinking about Christianity because the Jews are so insignificant. They were so small. Who on earth would be thinking about the Jews? That's one position. But the Jews from the beginning, as you see right in front of you, the Jews have always taken the position that the fact that we're not mentioned means that if you were a Jewish landowner and a male, that you had all the same rights that any other person entitled or enfranchised by this Constitution. All right, now here is a picture of what we call an original copy of the letter of the Jews of Newport, of Washington's letter to the Jews of Newport, his response. And we'll end with this, and I promise I'll leave time for questions. I'll just go through this quickly. Washington, only a few weeks later, writes a letter back to the Jews. And Washington has a habit of addressing each point in the letter. So first paragraph, he responds in first paragraph in his letter. Second paragraph, he responds second paragraph. And he does this with all the letters that he writes, at least almost all of them. And this is in Washington's copybook. So this was copied out by a secretary when Washington wrote the letter. And as you see on page 2 of it, Washington actually signed it. That's his real signature. It may not be his handwriting, but it's his signature. So this is Washington's word, and it cannot be said that Washington did not see this letter and it was sent by someone else. He signs this letter, and it went to the Jews of Newport. And they must have been very happy when they received the letter. Let's read it. This is again from Washington back to the Jews of Newport. And he says, "While I receive with much satisfaction your address, replete with expressions of affection and esteem, I rejoice in the opportunity of assuring you that I shall always retain a grateful remembrance of the cordial welcome I experienced in my visit to Newport from all classes of people." And of course, Washington is the Jews must have been so pleased to see this sentence, because this is what they said. They want to join with the other classes. And Washington says basically, yes, all the different groups. And I recognize the Jews as one of the groups who were part of the community in Newport that welcomed me. Now, if you remember the second paragraph, the Jews speak about Washington's difficult life and how, the battles he fought, and that God, the God of Israel protected him and all that. Listen to what Washington says in response to that. He says, "The reflection on the days of difficulty and danger, which are past, is rendered the more sweet from a consciousness that they are succeeded by days of uncommon prosperity and security. If we have wisdom to make the best use of the advantages with which we are now favored, we cannot fail, under the just administration of a good government, to become a great and happy people." I have to again make an editorial comment how relevant these words are. That if we could just behave, if we could just be appreciative, if we could just have good government, we have so many blessings. And Washington points this out already 250, 240 years ago. Now, we go on. This, friends, is the most important paragraph of all. This paragraph that begins with the words "all possess," because this is where Washington responds to the statement, which is really a question that the Jews of Newport posed to him. And so here's a quiz for all of you while we read this. You will quickly see that Washington agrees with everything they ask. But he adds something that they do not put into this letter. He adds something very important that the Jews didn't even think of. And the quiz for today is, what is it that Washington adds that the Jews do not ask about that is so important? So now we read the paragraph. Washington writes back, all possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. That's very good, right? He's acknowledging what they've asked. Yes, every citizen has freedom of conscience and immunities of citizenship. They got the answer from Washington. And then he writes, it is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it at all occasions their effectual support. Now, if you are noticing that Washington has added something that they didn't even argue about, and that is this, that we're not talking, Washington says, about noblesse oblige. We're not talking about toleration. We're not doing this because we in the majority are making room for a little minority, that we're doing this because we have authority and we're including you, we're tolerating you. What Washington clearly is saying is, you are entitled to this, as is everyone else, because it is the exercise of your inherent natural rights. Friends, if we were using theological language, we would say God-given rights. You're born with these rights, and no human being has the right to abridge them. And Washington puts this in, even though the Jews don't ask about that and are not looking for that. He gives them everything else, including, as you see with your own eyes, he responds by giving them, quoting back to them, the very words they put in their letter to him. For happily, the government of the United States, Washington says, gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. And finally, and with this we'll end, Washington wants, let's see here. Yeah, Washington wants to let the Jews know that he can quote Bible just as well as they can. So he ends with his own favorite quote. Scholars have noted that Washington ends with this quote more than any other biblical quote. This is one of his favorite. First of all, he says, I love this. When it gives us just a teeny window into his personality. He's such a two-dimensional figure. He's on a dollar bill. He's a Gilbert Stuart painting. He says, it would be inconsistent with the frankness of my character not to avow that I am pleased with your favorable opinion of my administration and fervent wishes for my felicity. It's sort of an aw shucks kind of thing. Oh, it really makes me feel so good that you guys like me. And then he goes back to the Bible and he says, may the children of the stock of Abraham. And of course, the Jews, when they read this, are probably going, woohoo, because that's how they introduce themselves. And he's repeating it, meaning, I've heard you, he's saying. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while every one shall sit in safety under his vine and fig tree, and there'll be none to make them afraid. He's quoting, of course, the prophet Micah 4:6. And then he offers in conclusion his own original prayer for the Jews and for everybody. And this is Washington's original prayer, and it's quite beautiful. He ends by saying, "May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way, everlastingly happy." It's quite something. Now, I'm ending, but I do want to point out that in your packets, which you all have, thanks to Dr. Garfinkel, that I included this case because I want you to see that this document has been repeatedly used and quoted again and again throughout the course of American history. And this is a rather recent example. It's from the 214, and it's about a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court between the town of Greece, New York, and a complainant by the name of Susan Galloway, who was not Jewish. And the gripe was that during business sessions at Greece, New York, they began with sectarian prayer. And she doesn't want any prayer because the government of Greece, she says, should not take any position on religion, and it should be expunged. And this goes up and up and up, and it gets to the Supreme Court in the year 2014. And even then, the Supreme Court decides that Greece is okay and can do what it's doing, and that Susan Galloway is wrong and loses. So they can continue their practice of beginning with sectarian prayer. However, not all the justices agreed with her, agreed with that position. And speaking for the minority was Justice Kagan. And you can read this on your own. We're not going to read through it, but you see at the bottom of this page, she starts, this is the fourth section of her statement. She says, in 1790, George Washington traveled to Newport, Rhode Island, and then she proceeds to tell the whole story that I just told you this evening. And if you look at the last page, she basically says that Washington, the father of our nation, guarantees to all citizens equal footing under the law. And the fact that Greece, the citizens of Greece, are not going to approach their government on equal footing is contrary to even what the president himself said. And she makes other arguments, but she puts this to use. And Jews continue to this very day always to to make good use of the document, arguing that this is how the father of our nation believed in this in these principles, and we should too. So I'm going to stop there. I've gone longer than I should, but I was on a roll. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can all see each other.
Let me start by saying, though, that I did not give people Justice Kagan's what she wrote. I broke up what you gave into two letters, right? I said, this is Washington's letter, this is the congregation's letter. I wanted to make sure they understood that there are two separate letters. I'll send the rest of it in my email later.
Okay, so anybody who wishes to have that letter, Dr. Garfinkel has it and can send it on to you.
Yeah, everybody will get it in the email I sent where they have the link to the recording.
Okay. So I see one question. Now it went away. Let's see.
I think that was
Washington actually.
Dina. Dina
Uh,
has a question.
Here, did Washington actually go to Newport Synagogue on the visit? He, without question, we know how he traveled. He did not, to the best of our knowledge, he didn't go inside the synagogue, but he could not, the route he traveled, where he went and where he stayed, he had to have seen the synagogue. It would be, and it was certainly pointed out to him.
It would be good if people can raise their hand, like I see Dina Glass. So, Dina, what's your question?
Well, it's not really a question, it's just really a comment. Because I was thinking, my husband and I lived in Tallahassee, Florida back in 1971, and I did not realize that Tallahassee was not like Miami. Um, and so he was hired for a company as the only Jew, and they would have weekly meetings, and each meeting would begin with, in the name of Christ our Lord. And after the second time this happened, he said, "Excuse me, but I resent this. I am not Christian, and I resent having this be the introduction to our weekly meetings." And the response was, "Oh, that's right, you're the Jew." And all I can think of that is because you keep on hearing this so often, just like glibly comes off of people's mouths when there's an invocation that they include Christ, and it bothered the hell out of me.
Well,
Then
if I could just respond real quick, well, first of all, this happens all over. Think about football games where they begin with prayer and things like that. However, it's complicated, and here's why it's complicated, because although the First Amendment guarantees the right of freedom of conscience, that everyone can think and believe what he or she wants, the other half of that amendment gives every religion freedom of practice.
right,
So when someone knocks on your door and wants to convert you, that's not against the Constitution. That's their belief, and they're entitled. It may be annoying, it may be irksome, but and we have that same right, we as Jews. So it becomes complicated, and sometimes Jews, what they want to do is they want to push religion out of the picture altogether, and that's not really what the Constitution is offering. So no, I understand. I understand exactly. And you see, I see someone who is from Tallahassee right now who's sending you greetings. So okay, but
I won't talk about the other thing, which was definitely a slur. That was a forgiveness.
yes, yes.
The other
Well,
thing
I
was,
used to tell rabbinic students, and then we'll go to the next question, but I used to tell rabbinic students, your job is to help people always to understand that there is a difference between a country wherein the majority of the people are Christian and a Christian country. That's your job. Your job is to help people to understand this, that no one is questioning that the majority of the people are a part of the Christian community. That's a fact, and it's going to continue to be a fact for many, many decades and indefinitely. But there is a difference between that and a Christian nation. And again, I don't have to tell all of you, you listen to the news as much as I do. There are people arguing to this day that, despite the documents, that we're reading and studying that America's a Christian nation. And our job is to teach Washington's letter and other such documents which will refute that.
Beryl?
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I am sorry I joined a little late. I had a conflict earlier.
Well, I'm glad you caught any of it.
Yeah, I had two questions. Maybe you covered it in the before I joined. I thought a lot of our founding fathers of this nation were deists, and I don't know if Washington was Christian or deist or somewhere in between.
Well, yeah, I can answer that. That's a good question, and you're right. Many of them were deists, not all, but many of them. But deism didn't mean they weren't Christian.
Okay.
Deism is I mean, you theoretically you could be a Jewish deist. In other words, being a deist meant that your basic religious philosophy was that there was a creator God that oversaw the universe and that was watching over us and urging us to do good and so forth, and not necessarily a partisan to what you might call um, uh, you know uh, denominationalism. Like think about Methodism or Lutheranism. They have a whole series of rigid denominational teachings. We may not know much about it, but they do. And so these people sort of had a much more liberal approach. They believed in God, and they believed the importance of God, and they believed that they couldn't conceive of a world without God. They were not atheists, but they didn't align with a strict denominational theory. So yes, people like Jefferson. I mean, one day you'll invite me back and I'll talk to you about Jefferson's Bible. I don't know how many of you know Jefferson.
Yeah.
You're going to think I'm making this up, but Jefferson literally took the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, what they call the Christian Bible, and he cut out all the parts that he thought were fabulous, were superstitious and were not true and were out of line with science, and just kept the parts that he felt were morally uplifting. This is called the Jefferson Bible. And you can go to the Library of Congress and see an actual copy of it. The original is in the Library of Congress now. So Jefferson was that kind of fellow. In other words, there was a place for religion and for piety, but not all. They were not people who followed this kind of rigid denominationalism.
Yeah.
Did he do
I
that
do know
also
about
for
the
Quran?
Go ahead. Beryl, is that it? You finish your question.
I know about the Jefferson Bible because I watched the last Smithsonian Channel and they talked about it and how it was made and things. But I'd like to hear a lecture on that. The other question is, Zola is your last name,
Yes.
and Emile Zola, I think, spoke on behalf. I remember my French history
Yes.
spoke on behalf
Yeah.
of Dreyfus.
Captain Dreyfus.
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Any
Yes, but
relation?
well, you know that Emile Zola was not Jewish. To the best of my knowledge, I descend from a long line of assimilated Jews.
Oh,
But
okay.
my name was originally Zlatkov. But Jews always change their names or give names to honor people who were good to the Jews. So that's why Alexander, is a Greek name, but lots of Jews have the name Alexander. Cyrus the Persian is Cyrus in the Bible. He let the Jews go back to Jerusalem. So Jews give their children the name Cyrus. And for a period of time in the early 20th century, people gave their names, Jews, their baby's name was Zola, and because of what you pointed out. So I'd like to believe they changed my name to ZOLA because they wanted to pay honor to this courageous author, Emile Zola.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're welcome. Any other?
One of the questions I had when you was talking about Jefferson, did he do the same thing for the Quran? I thought he did that also for Quran.
Not that I know of, just the Bible. He may have spoken about the Quran and written about it. I'm not an expert in that, but because he was very well read and very
Yeah.
intellectual.
There's a question that whether, you talked about the various letters to Washington, and Washington presumably replied to almost all of them. But did the people at the time, were there copies of did people know what was going on with all these letters?
Uh, well, yes, in a way, because for example, all four of the letters that the Jews wrote, except I should say, not the one that the Freemasons wrote, but all the others were printed often in the papers. So yes, if you could read, you could know about it. It was and that's how we know. In fact, to this day, if you can get an original newspaper that has the letter, I mean, the actual copy of it, if it survived, that's very valuable. Collectors, will charge a lot of money for that. Um, the congregations that wrote the four letters. So the first letter came from the Savannah congregation. Then there was a letter that came from Charleston, Philadelphia, New York, and Richmond together. And then the third letter was from Newport, which we studied this evening. And the final fourth letter was a short little note from the Freemasons, Jewish Freemasons of Newport.
As I told you earlier, when I was in Savannah, they showed me the letter that they had sent and gotten back and stuff. So it's in their archives at the synagogue.
Somebody just wrote that Jefferson owned a Quran, which I can believe in, that some members of the Muslim community who are in Congress um, uh, put their hand on the Jefferson Quran. So when I speak of the Jefferson Bible, I don't mean just a Bible that he owned. I mean this special Bible that he created. But as someone's writing that their Jefferson owned, he had in his library a Quran, which that I'm not the least bit surprised.
Yeah, I read about that. You, Mr. Starr, you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. I've attended the Touro Synagogue. Actually, it was for my nephew's Ufruf destination wedding in Newport. And there is a seat designated in the synagogue as the seat in which George Washington sat when he attended the synagogue. And it's blocked off so that no one at this point can sit in that particular seat. You mentioned though that you don't think that he actually entered the synagogue.
Yeah, I don't. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have. I may be wrong about this. There may be other scholarship on this that I have missed. But to the best of my knowledge, that when he visited in 1790, this is what I'm talking about. He did not enter the synagogue. We don't have any evidence of that. That's there. Remember that the synagogue was built before the revolution. That synagogue. And if you go to Curacao or a number of other Spanish Portuguese synagogues, all of them put the seat for the potentate that looks just like that. They build it that way. And that area was probably erected for if King George ever came to the colony, so he would sit there, or the governor or something like that. now, whether or not, uh, uh, you know, Washington actually walked into the synagogue, I can't say he didn't because, but there's no evidence that I've ever been exposed to that he actually entered the synagogue.
So just like chopping the cherry tree and
Yes,
tossing
yes,
a
yes,
dollar across
yes,
the
yes,
Potomac,
yes, yes.
this
In fact, I'll tell you,
maybe.
there's a terrific. I don't know if I have it. A lot of times people will come up to me. I don't have a dollar bill on me right now, but they'll wave a dollar bill in front of me and they'll say, "Dr. Zola, do you know why there's a Jewish star on the dollar bill?" And I always respond by saying, I do know why there's a Jewish star on the dollar bill, and you don't, because what they're what they're suggesting is they've heard this story about Chaim Solomon, this Jew who was very important in raising money, IOUs, for
Oops.
here, but he didn't personally fund the revolution. But there's this very peculiar a rumor going saying that George Washington, after the revolution succeeded, went to uh, Chaim Solomon, asked Solomon, oh, I owe you so much. Without you, we would have never had succeeded in the revolution. What can I do to repay you? And Solomon says, I want you to put a dollar, Jewish star on the dollar bill so that people will always know what the Jews did for the American Revolution. Well, this is complete hooey. And, they didn't even have a greenback back in those days, but people believe this, so they, now there's probably a rumor. If any of you on this line learn about a documented evidence that Washington was inside the synagogue, please send it to me and I'll stand corrected.
On the synagogue question, I always thought that Sheriff Israel was the original, the longest continuous service.
Well, they claim to be the oldest synagogue, meaning not building. We're talking about buildings. So
Congregation.
yeah, congregation. They claim that in 1654, we know the Jews prayed in 1654. They met regularly and they prayed. And Sheriff Israel in New York says that's when we started. Chances are that there's no direct connection to the current Sheriff Israel, but that it probably was formed much more formally later. But that's their story, and they're sticking to it.
Other questions that people can raise their hand? It's hard to see people raising their hand physically. If you can raise your hand electronically, we can.
And Jerry, we probably should wrap up soon.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Dr. Marcus used to say, and is one of my favorite sayings that he taught me. He used to say that people can absorb mentally only as much as their tushy can endure. So you all you've endured a long lecture tonight, and I appreciate the invitation, and I really commend all of you for wanting to continue to study and learn.
Say good.
Jerry,
Thank you very much.
can I thank Dr.
Everybody
Zola?
appreciates it.
Why?
Howard,
Why is this Jewish star on the dollar bill? What's the reason you know?
Well, if you take a look on the back of the dollar bill, and you'll see where the pyramid is and the eye above.
That's the Masons.
Right, exactly. And the Jewish star is from the Masons. It has nothing to do with Chaim Solomon.
Say good night to Aunt Panina. There she is in her picture looking at you, Gary.
Yes, thank you. You come back again. Well, we should have a whole lecture on Panina Moise. Anita Rosenberg is a direct descendant of Panina Moise, one of the great pioneering American Jewish women from Charleston, South Carolina, a poet, a literateur, a founder of the Sunday school there, and really a great American Jewish woman.
Hey, Jerry, I would just say
Thank
speaking of
you.
dollar bills, both the American Jewish Archives and our Jewish Study Center accept donations from people. So Jerry's our warden and Dr. Zola is our teacher tonight.
Right.
So Jerry, I mean beyond words, Dr. Zola, this is wonderful. Jerry, I'll let you close this out.
Okay, I will thank you again for the great lecture. I mean, I thought I knew something about the Revolutionary War, but Revolutionary time period, but I learned a lot more today. We don't have any other classes scheduled. There's a number of classes that we're working on. We're discussing with people to give. So there'll be emails sent out. There'll be email, of course, with the link to the recording of this class. Plus, I will attach the information about Justice Kagan and the other the letters. But we will later on have emails that would talk about new classes coming up. So,
hey, Jerry, can I throw in, can we invite Dr. Zola back for America's tricentennial? Can we all regather here in 50 years from now and do another?
It would be my honor. I plan to be here.
Excellent.
I will be.
We all will be here. Everybody here is invited for 50 years from now to have its
We'll send out a
You
link.
should be, if you're alive.
Either way.
Listen, Jeremy Bentham, the poet, they drag him out in the Poet Society as a corpse. So, we can do it that way. But at any rate, best wishes to all of you, really. And thank you for all of you who wrote such nice words in the chat. That's very, very gratifying. And I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Zola, Jerry, Mindy, everybody. Jerry, is that it? Is that a wrap?
That's it, I think. We'll close off now.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.